I've been sitting here for about 15 minutes just with my eyes closed, breathing. And I've been doing that because sometimes when your mind opens up, when your body opens up, it's a lot to feel. It's a lot to experience. It's a lot of energy to feel in the body. And I feel a lot in my body right now, in my heart. Just a real opening up in my heart and a real opening up in my mind. And it's easy for the mind, it's easy for our thinking mind to jump in there and say, ooh, I got to do something with this. I got to make sense of this. I have to wrap a story around this. I have to wrap a narrative around this. I have to figure this out. I have to understand this thing. And in the understanding, we get tripped up in all sorts of ideas and all sorts of attachments, all sorts of stories. And it's easy to start turning the sensations in our body in the present moment into this complete new thing in the mind. And in contemplating that and living in that and navigating that and strategizing in that and looking for the right way to win in that game, to understand the rules of that game and how to navigate and bend and work within those rules and how to win within that game. Excuse me. I find just stepping back and looking at the sensation of it in the moment to be very helpful, because that mind does rush in and tries to make sense and tries to tell a story and tries to take control. I think that is the essence of what we call the ego. The ego is a sense of the self that needs to come in and I need to figure this out and I need to take control of this and I need to make sense of this and I have an idea of what's going on here and I know what is. And that part of us has been taught to come in and start putting constraints and parameters and rules and perspectives on our experiences. We've been taught that our whole life. We've been taught it by our close loved ones, by our caregivers, by our close family and community, by our culture, our subculture, and then what is the matrix of things? What is the story that's being told on a much more grand level? And how are we all a part of that story? How did that story manifest? What are the rules of that much grander story? And how do we all play within that? What is our role within that? What are the rules of that game? And how are we locked into that through our perception, through our fears, through our contemplations, through our ideas, through our beliefs? So when I'm in this space of feeling, when I'm in this space of just being really open, without putting a big story on it, without telling an ego story about it, and just being in a space of having a really open sense of perception in the body and in the mind, it's easy for that mind to come in and start trying to wrap a story around and trying to take control and trying to make sense. And part of the reason why is because of that fear thing. We're just being mindful of how I'm saying it, that we want to believe we know the answers. We want to believe we know the truth. We want to believe that we are correct in our perspective and that the world is the way we believe it to be. And the parts that we don't understand and the parts that are really scary, we're just going to push way over here, or we're going to build a wall around those parts, and we're never going to really consider the parts that are just so far out that we just don't want to go there. So we build all these structures in our mind and in our body, and we tether ourselves to a certain type of story, and we operate within that story. And I hope it's not presumptuous of me to say so. I certainly have my story and my narrative and my journey. And there's value in understanding that and unraveling that and untethering that and taking a step back. And that's the beauty in where I started. Why did I sit here for 15 minutes just breathing? The beauty in taking a step back and being in the breath, and something I've been asking myself lately, when I am in this really open space, and when I am faced with something I don't want to be faced with, when I'm faced with kind of toxic circumstances that I don't want to be faced with, but I still have to face, to sit back in the breath and to say, what if all I had was this moment? And to really look into that, what if all I had was this moment? Well, what is that for me? It's a certain sensation in this moment. It's a sensation of being here in this place. It's a sensation in my body. It's a sensation in my heart. I can pinpoint that sensation in my breath and how my breath manifests in my body through my blood, through the electrochemical signals going through my body, through the energy flow of my body, just what being in this present moment is. If I'm just observing it and I'm just navigating it through the breath, and I'm noticing, these webs of stories coming up and these webs of ideas and these things that I need to be attached to and that I need to start operating within. The moment you go down a certain type of pathway, there's a certain operating pattern. There's certain rules to it. There's a certain structure to it. There's a certain way of being. You start trying to find your way into that space, and it doesn't always feel right. And you have sensations in your body that are telling you when things feel good or when they feel bad or when they feel right or when they feel wrong. But modern society for a long time has told you that those sensations are disorders called depression and anxiety or some variation thereof. And modern society has given you medicine for your disorder, and it tells you that your God-given intuition, the sensations in your body that are telling you to move toward or move away or to look at from a different perspective or to shift your perspective or to adapt or to adjust. This unbelievable wise vessel that we live within becomes programmed in fear, and it becomes programmed in reaction, it becomes programmed in avoidance, and it becomes programmed to believe that the sensations we experience in our body are the very problems that we are trying to get rid of. So we learn to hate ourselves, and we learn to fear ourselves. We learn to reject ourselves, and we learn to, because we don't want to process our own emotions in our body, well, they don't just disappear. We project them outward. We push them outward. We put it out, and we start blaming everybody else, and we point the finger at everyone else, and everyone else's perspective is wrong. And we're going to huddle up next to the people that we feel the closest perspective to. For whatever reason, we might not even like them. We might just huddle up because this is like our tribe and this is our safe space. And we get so tangled up in these different stories that we tell. And then we're told to not trust ourselves by very powerful entities that it's not a conspiracy. People use the word conspiracy to minimize sometimes very worthy perspectives. And you have to be very mindful and very critical how you navigate the perspectives that come your way. and to certainly not simply follow a story or an assumption because someone makes an assumption about a certain set of circumstances, like a lot of people are doing now. There's a million stories about what's happening now and how it's happening and why it's happening and what you should do to prepare for it and how you should freak out in some way, how you should adapt yourself in some way, how you should bend your body, bend your mind, bend your heart, bend your spirit, bend your perspective to some fear-based story that's rooted in concepts of separation, concepts of disgust, concepts of fear. How do you separate people? How do you control people? How do you use the circumstances that you're given? I'll go down that road so that we don't have to go down the road of saying that the virus we're experiencing is somehow a created thing. Let's just say it's a natural thing and the world is natural and things happen and shit happens and viruses happen. And certainly we've taken a lot of barriers away to passing viruses on amongst ourselves. So, global pandemics are not exactly, a big surprise under the circumstances. But it's the stories we all wrap around it, the fear stories. The how do certain entities start messaging, and how does that messaging relate to our particular tribe and our particular perspective? There's all these entities out there. When I use the word entities, I'm saying like political organizations, corporate structures, corporate organisms of people working for a certain outcome that doesn't have a lot to do with value or what is best for society or what is best for people, or it's not really rooted in value. It's just strictly rooted in profit, and profit is defined by a certain parameter, and that organism will just feed off of the populace or the planet in the way that it needs to in order to survive and thrive and grow, actually. And we participate in that. We participate in it by buying into all of these different ideologies and all these different stories and all these different perspectives. And the sensations we feel in our body are not just sensations in the moment. They're not just interpreted as God-given wisdom. We don't just boil it down to what is my heart, what is my gut, what is my mind telling me in the present moment, without all the ideas attached to it, without this taking of sides, separate stuff attached to it. So trying to tie all that together, of course there are people and there are entities that will take advantage of circumstances that are presented. And it's always been that way. The moment someone decided they could have power over others by manipulating reality and manipulating ideas, and by considering people as commodities rather than something much grander than that, the moment that existed, these types of things took place, and people take advantage of natural circumstances, and we start interpreting the storms as such and such a thing, and we start interpreting the volcano as such and such a thing, and we start interpreting people's behavior as such and such a thing, and we are able to manipulate, and we are able to separate, and we're able to gain power by keeping people confused in their ideas. And as long as they're confused in their ideas and they're able to be separated, they're easily manipulated, and we can easily feed off of them. And we can grow our organisms. We can co-create from this perspective, and we can grow ourselves off of these people. I find it really interesting. Recently, I've been rewatching all the Star Wars, just part of what I've been sharing, and I don't mind being open about this because I think just being open and honest is good. But my mother, I'm very fortunate to have a mother that was able to come spend some time out here while I've been going through a divorce, and is able to bring that grandma love to the home and, provide some great support. But anyway, what's hilarious is Grammy has never seen any of the Star Wars. So we started at A New Hope and we went through all of it, and now we're at The Last Jedi. And if you haven't checked them out recently, I'd recommend watching them all back to back, because the parallels of what the themes of Star Wars from beginning to end are so profoundly parallel to what we're faced with in society today. And when you get outside of ideas, ideologies, when you get outside of you're in that tribe and you're in that tribe, you're the Republican and you're the Democrat, you're from the country and you're from urban, you're from whatever country, you're from whatever tribe. When you get beyond all that and you just start looking at things from the perspective of light and dark, or love and hate, togetherness, connectedness, and separation, energies that connect versus energies that separate, energies that love versus energies that hate, intentions, if you don't like the word energies, intentions that motivate connection, intentions that motivate coming together and working in a sort of symbiotic way with one another and with the place we call home, and not calling it a political thing and not calling it a thing other than individuals taking full responsibility for themselves, untethering the mind from all these stories that are being told, and just looking at, if I'm really reading myself in this present moment in as honest a way as I can, and I'm just noticing the sensations in my body, I actually don't need to start telling that story in my mind. I don't need to react in accordance with whatever pulse is being put out there by these entities that would take advantage of certain circumstances and would utilize those circumstances to further divide people and to essentially put people in a position to be much better consumers, or to be much better fuel. If you want to look at it a different way, people are fuel in a certain way for something. What are we fueling? What are we feeding? What are we part of? What are we creating? What are we co-creating? Do we like what we're creating and co-creating? If you feel helpless to it, perhaps the answer is to take full responsibility for how you are doing your part in creating and co-creating. What stories are you telling? What news channels are you listening to? What entities are you subscribing to? What is your body and mind pulsing in accordance with? And how is that being told to your wives and husbands and to your children and to your neighbors? How is your body pulsing to the stories that are being told? Are you pulsing in fear? Are you pulsing in anger? Are you pulsing in love? And how is that manifesting in your life? And how are you part of creating the very things that you are saying you're afraid of and that you don't want to happen? Do you like separation? Do you like fear? Do you like being told what to do? Do you like being put in a position where you're made to believe that you need a certain type of government to rescue you from your circumstances? See, I don't look at that politically, because you could easily start forcing me into some political ideology there. I look at it mythologically. I look at it from a perspective of a mother and a father, or God. This idea that people reject God because they believe God should somehow rescue us from our circumstances. And rather than becoming full adults, rather than going from being children and adolescents and growing into full adults who take full responsibility for the choices we make, see, I don't think we talk about responsibility on the degree of emotions or on the degree of what we're creating And there's no way to enforce this, and it's never about force, it's never about pushing, it's never about imposing. It's about inspiring. What taking responsibility looks like in how we create from that place as a group of people, as a culture of people. And what does it look like when, rather than allowing your body to pulse in accordance with what you're watching on Fox News or CNN or whatever, you know, whatever your thing is, whatever story you're telling, whatever you're freaking out about. Imagine if, instead of sitting in the lazy boy and letting the body pulse from a place of fear or a place of anger, or look at what they're doing today, look at what story they're telling today, look at what they're doing today to fuck with us. What if it'd be stepping back and saying, it's interesting, the story they're telling is making my body feel a certain way. Do I agree with that sensation? Do I want my body to feel what this story is making it feel? And do I want to pulse in anger and attach that anger to a certain type of idea and a certain type of story of such and such a thing that's happening in the world? And now my children are pulsing, and my little children are pulsing in that way. Now my neighbors are pulsing in that way. Now whoever I'm shaking my fist at in traffic is pulsing in that way. And we're acting out our emotions in accordance with the stories we're being told. What if taking full responsibility looks like sitting there on your couch, listening to the stories that are being told and being mindful of them, being mindful of the information, being mindful of what is being created, what is being presented to you, and being mindful of your own sense of response to that, and whether you want to agree with that, or whether you want to support it, whether you want to push it forward by how you respond to it, or whether you can do what I was doing when I started here today, which is, okay, there's way too much coming in all at once. My mind is open to too many things all at once. There's too many stories being told. There's too many tethers out there. There's too many to-dos on my to-do list. I'm noticing my neighbor kitty corner from me yelling at his kid, and I'm listening to how his young teenage boy is responding to his anger. And I've heard this before. And I'm going through this dialogue in my mind of, when do you intervene in your community? It kind of picks up from something I've been talking about recently, which is, when do you intervene with your children, and when do you let them experience a certain amount of suffering? When do you allow your children to learn from experience and from their choices and how they're navigating and how they're interacting with other children, and other children bring their stories and their pulses and what their parents are teaching them, and now your child is learning from other children. It's all this like co-creation thing in the community, this soup of generational information and stories and trauma that is also being utilized by very intelligent, very powerful, very wealthy entities out there who are really, really good at utilizing our stories to divide us and separate us, and to make us really good consumers, make us good fuel. So I'm listening to this guy yelling at his kid, and I'm hearing this young man's voice. And I've heard this voice many times before. And it's also the voice represented in the memories of my clients of a child begging their parent to stop. A child communicating through a whimper, through a cry, through a yell, "Please, Dad, stop. Please don't hurt me. Dad, why are you hurting me? Why are you hurting me? Your words are hurting me. The way you're speaking is hurting me. You're not trying to help me. You're not trying to correct me. You're not trying to guide me. You're not trying to teach me. You're just blah, vomiting your anger on me. Dad, that hurts. It hurts me. So I'm across the fence and I'm listening to this. And you're wondering, at what point do you intervene with a stranger on behalf of a child? I know that's something everybody can relate to. Anybody can relate to, looking out. And we've become the society of people that have been so profoundly divided. We're implicitly divided by the structures that we've created that are supposed to rescue us. Even conservative people that believe in a very small government implicitly accept that if you hear a child suffering, you're supposed to call child welfare services or the police. You're supposed to have some organization or entity come in and intervene and come in and make it right. And if you can't, well, guess there's nothing you can do about it. How many people have heard a neighbor crying or screaming or yelling and just wondered, at what point do you intervene? Too often we don't intervene, even in really nasty circumstances. This situation I'm faced with is a situation I think a lot of us have experienced many times in our life. Experiencing an adult, whether it's a teacher or a parent or any adult, vomiting their anger on you, projecting that pulse of anger and fear because they've picked it up from some circumstance in their life or some story that's being told. Someone has hurt me. Someone is to blame for how I feel. Someone out there made me feel this way. And now I'm angry and I'm hurt and I'm injured and I'm coming home from work and I'm not being treated the way I want to be treated by life, by society. No one values me. I don't feel loved by society. I don't feel loved by government. I don't feel like my fathers and forefathers give a fuck about me. So now I'm angry and now I'm yelling at my kid. I happen to know my neighbor is a Marine, and I happen to know a few things about that community and what this young man actually has experienced and what his child is experiencing. And the thought that came to me as I was listening to them and as I was really navigating, when do you intervene? Regardless of calling the police or child welfare services, when do you intervene? For me, I think experiencing a certain amount of suffering is very important for development and growth, for becoming an operator of this world. You need to be tested. You need to work through challenges. You need to be tested. We can't nerf everything. That's so dangerous and harmful. Ironically, quite toxic to try to make everyone too protected. And that's something we're facing in our society. That's a real poison right now, is this idea that we're supposed to make everyone, we're supposed to allow some big entity to keep everyone safe. My God, that's a dangerous premise. We need some overarching entity to make sure everyone is safe and equal so we don't get hurt. So you sacrifice all the power to this overarching entity, and now we're supposed to have someone we call that's always going to keep us safe, that's always going to make sure our neighbors treat each other fairly and equally, and they use the right pronouns, and they don't trust each other to that much more of a degree. And it's all about, none of us are responsible anymore. None of us are responsible to each other. None of us are responsible for the child next door. We're supposed to call someone that's supposed to intervene, and they now hold the keys to what is important in our lives. When do you intervene? In my experience as a clinical psychologist working with a lot of families, they don't get intervened with until they're bleeding. They show up and they're bleeding. It takes a lot of clear information before this kind of entity will come in and say, hey, this is wrong. You can't do this. You can't inject drugs and beat your kid bloody, But what I experience is, what people minimize this idea of emotional abuse, or they minimize this idea of, harmful yelling and screaming and manipulating. And When a child needs to, this is what I kind of came to, when a child needs to start to manipulate their mind, they start to need to live in denial. They start to need to rationalize, well, daddy must be beating me because daddy is just hurting right now, and I'm a strong kid and I can handle this, and I know daddy will get better one day. And I listen to the stories children tell, and I listen to the stories adults tell in my practice. And the degrees to which children have to warp their reality to survive their childhoods is astounding. And it's astounding that we don't take responsibility for that as individuals, as families, as communities, as cultures, without needing some entity to tell us what to do, without needing some broken parent figure, some broken God figure to tell us what is good for us. We have shared values, shared norms, shared, you know the difference between resonating from a place of love versus resonating from a place of hate. That's built into us. You know what it feels like to be harmed versus compassionately guided. That kid who is almost whimpering is begging his father to stop hurting him, to stop putting his anger onto him. So how do we as communities reclaim responsibility for what we choose to think about and what we choose to resonate, what we choose to create, what we choose to support? What are we doing by hiding in our homes, expecting someone else to take care of it, some entity to take care of it, some local organization, someone else other than you to take care of it, someone else other than you to take responsibility for the thoughts in your head and the ideas you become attached to and what becomes important to you and what you fight for, who you're willing to oppose or subjugate or judge or malign because you disagree with their perspective. So when I came in here today and decided to sit down on this January 1st, 2021, and like a lot of you, you're probably in a reflective place today, and I was in a reflective place today, and I was going back through some journal entries, which put my mind in the place of history, which put my mind in the place of what I've experienced the last 3 years of my life, and just making sense of where things are currently, and and just being open to those memories bubbling to the surface and being released, trying not to hold on to them, but almost letting them release, and noticing the sensations in the body and letting it open up, and just getting to a place where I felt very open, and at the same time being with my children and watching them play and playing with them and getting my mind back into a present place, and then going in the backyard and hearing the neighbor yelling at his kid. And so just sitting here for 15 minutes and listening to my breath and kind of saying the mantra, what if all I had was right here and right now? What if all I had was my breath? And I sit here in the sensation of my breath, and I feel my chest going up and down. You feel the sensation of your body being fed oxygen by your blood and how that lights up your body and lights up your mind. What's interesting is going from all that noise and all that stuff that wants to influence us and all that information, and just being in that space of breath and wondering what if all I had was right now in my breath, in this moment, the sensations in my body without a story attached to them, and I could look at the beauty of even this moment, even the light on my desk, even the fact that I just get to be here. I get to experience this. I get to experience this time and place. I get to experience you. I get to experience my children. I get to navigate this crazy world that we're living in, and all the crazy ideas coming at us, and all these stories that are being told. We are living in a time of mass information overload and mass manipulation of information, and really mass hysteria is taking place. So thanks for wandering around with me today. Thanks for just allowing me to navigate my own thoughts and my own mind and my own body, and just kind of share with you where my mind is today. And really, that what I do love about sharing in this space with you is that before I hit that record button, the mind has many, many ideas to explore, many places to go down. And it's easy to get lost in that. And it's easy to have 10 thoughts at the same time and want to weave them all together. And what I've learned through a lot of trial and error and a lot of just observing myself and observing how I, relate to the world around me and the stories I'm telling myself and the attachments I have. Just recognizing what it's like to slow down and be with the breath in the present moment, and to let go of some of those stories and let go of some of that noise and let go of some of those attachments and let go of some of those fears, and consider the possibility that the stories I'm being told by the world around me are not correct, or that they are driven by a certain type of reality, a certain story that has been created and told, and that we implicitly buy into these societal norms and these certain structures. Nietzsche talked a lot about that. Becoming the Ubermensch, becoming the Superman, becoming the person that recognizes that we are living in a network of societal norms and stories and structures, and that we operate within that in a certain way, and that we can actually make a choice to say no thank you. No thank you. I'll take responsibility for my breath. I'll notice the sensations in my body in this present moment. I'll choose whether I want my body to be taken over by your story, whether I want to pulse and co-create with the cult that you have created, the power structure that you've created, the ideas you've created, the club you want me to be a part of. No thank you. I'll just sit here with my breath and twiddle this rock in my hand and talk to my friends and try to walk quietly down a certain pathway without being overly tangled up in the mire of what we are presented with every single day in the plugged-in world. So I wish all of you such a great, wonderful new year. Something about a new year, I think we need rites of passage. We need moments to say, okay, that's done, time to move on. Like we emotionally and mentally, we decide, which it's kind of fascinating how we do that. But okay, we're done with that. Let's move on. I think that's part of where I was today. Like, oh, okay, new year. New time, new perspective. What do I want to let go of? New Year's resolutions. So I love sharing this space with you, whoever does choose to listen to this. And I love sharing this space because I know all of you are having very complex dialogue with yourselves and with your families and your neighbors and community. And I know most of you feel quite alone in your own thoughts, feel quite alone in your own perspective. As much as you have your club, as much as you have your community, as much as you have whatever it is that you subscribe to, that you attach yourself to, you feel quite alone in your actual concerns, in your actual perspective, in your actual truth. And, when I work with people, when I do therapy with people, when I get to share space with people, walk next to them in their journey and be a guide of sorts, or just point things out and say, hey, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? to just be a really good like tour guide, you know? When you get to share that space with people, it's such a gift. It's such a gift. And it's such a gift to be able to share this space with you. However I wander through my thoughts and however many times I pause and reflect and change directions. And, you know, I recognize that all of you are navigating your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own sensations and your own stories and your own families and how you as an individual see this big picture. And I know there's a lot of people out there, I would say the majority of people, that are really alarmed by what we have created or what we are witnessing, whatever side you're on. If you're not alarmed by what you're witnessing, alarmed in the sense of this is not moving in the direction of love and light and healing and compassion and proactive co-creation and symbiosis, you know, with the environment. It's moving in the direction of anger and separation and fear. And that's kind of how I'm looking at my neighbor's situation. What direction are they moving in? Is this guy moving in the direction of healing? And is he just in pain and his kid's in pain and it's temporary and he's trying to heal? Or is he moving in the direction of darkness? What I heard today, the afterthought was, I heard reflection. I heard his voice go from loud to quiet. Something about this young man, he's been doing some work at some point. Because I've heard the pain and I've heard that child cry and I've heard him cross the line. And today was different. The initial eruption was there. The initial reaction was there. But the follow-up was, hey, my voice is now more quiet. I'm now trying to get to manage myself. I'm now trying to calm the situation down. So you got to give space for that learning and that growing. I think that's a good place to be done today. I could keep going on. But thank you for sharing this space with me. I wish you well in navigating the stories in your life, the pain in your life, the people in your life, your job, your home, your community. And I know there are a lot of you out there that are concerned by the direction. It's really the overarching concern on all sides, and everyone has their version of story of who to blame. It's unbelievable how you can sit on one side of the political spectrum and completely empathize with why people tell the story that way and why they see the world that way. And you can go on the other side of the political spectrum and completely see why they tell the story that way and why they articulate the world that way. It's really amazing when you take a step back from it. And you just get with your breath in the moment. And you start letting go of the thought of it. And you start letting go of the story of it. And you start realizing that just because it's a big story and everyone's telling it and people are freaking out doesn't mean you have to. And you start thinking about what is the best way to navigate this present moment? What is the best way to be in this present moment? And you see things moving in that direction of fear and pain and darkness and negativity and anger. And you know where that leads. It leads to things like war. That's where that story goes when we co-create in the direction of fear and separation and subjugation of the other and creation of the other. You know the difference between that and then taking a breath in the moment, noticing how the stories around you are influencing how you're feeling in your body and mind and what you're choosing to create from that and how that's being created in your home and in your family and in your community and how you're a part of it. I think there may be, I don't know if I like statements of there's never been a time like this, but I think it's a great time for people to get courageous, and for people to get courageous that if you believe in love as a thing that you can practice, if you believe that you can surrender yourself to love and that you can become love, if you're a Christian, if you can believe that Christ can become you, that you can surrender yourself and allow Christ within, and that you can fully become love, you can allow God to become you. Or if you just believe that you can surrender and choose to focus your attention on love, no matter what happens, no matter what stories they tell you, no matter how much they try to separate us, no matter how much they try to make us afraid, no matter how much they try to utilize the natural circumstances that we are actually faced with to manipulate us, to feed off of us until the bitter end. No matter how much they throw at you, can you be still? Can you get with your breath? Can you notice the present moment? Can you choose to turn your fear into love? Can you choose to live from a place of love, a place of courage, a place of truth? Can you choose to practice that every day and to resonate that and to create from that place? That's how I believe change for good happens. I believe that's how healing happens. I believe we have a lot of collective healing to do. I believe our nation has a lot of healing to do. Our world has a lot of healing. We have generations upon generations of horrible trauma that we have stored up in our body, and that makes us buy into all these stories of it's always someone else's fault. We've always been the victim of someone. We need some entity to protect us. We need some overarching structure to keep us safe. We need to sacrifice our freedom and our voice. We need the sensations of our body to be problems, to be disorders, to be depressions and anxieties, rather than God-given wisdom that are telling us something is not right about the stories we're being told. To realize all of us have a place in what we create. So thanks for sharing this first day of January 2021 with me. So much love to all of you. Take care. This is Dr. Mark Jesinoski. This is the Wizard Podcast, episode 38. We'll be talking to you soon. Take care.